and welcome to Slow Sleep Stories. Today's tale is called The Middle Schooler Who Accidentally Solved a Town Puzzle. It follows an 11-year-old named Milo Jensen, whose love for puzzles, peanut butter sandwiches, and quiet walks ends up unraveling a decades-old Milo Jensen in his sleepy hometown of peanut butter sandwiches, Pennsylvania, and quiet walks. Before you get unraveling a decades-old Milo Jensen in his love for puzzles of peanut butter sandwiches, Pennsylvania, quiet walks. And before you get unraveling a decades together tonight in his love for Pennsylvania, wasn't a place where much happened. There were more porch swings than people under 30. And the loudest thing most days was the clunk of the postman's boots on the old courthouse steps. It was the kind of town where summer seemed to pause longer than anywhere else, where you could smell biscuits baking 2 blocks away, and where a slight breeze could be mistaken for gossip. In this town, tucked between the hills and the antique barns, lived a boy named Milo Jensen. Milo had a face full of freckles, hair that seemed to be trying to outrun combs, and a mind that wandered faster than most grown-ups could follow. He wasn't particularly loud or athletic, though he could balance a spoon on his nose longer than any kid in his class. His hobbies included counting the ceiling tiles in homeroom, drawing tiny maps in the margins of his math homework, and making sandwiches with exactly 1.5 tablespoons of peanut butter anymore, and it felt excessive every afternoon. After school, while most kids were arguing over which video game was better, or trading snacks in the parking lot, Milo walked the long way home. He said it helped him stretch his brain. Fell asleep on a fishing pole. Stillwater was proud of its history, mostly because it was easier than making new history. Old buildings stood like retired actors. Office that had 3 jars of buttons and a sock. From 1890, you had to ring the bell twice to get the key, but Milo didn't care much for dusty exhibits. What fascinated him were the odd things no one talked about anymore, or the tiny door under the bridge, which didn't seem to lead anywhere but always smelled faintly of cinnamon. And most of all, he was fascinated by the sidewalk behind the library. It was cracked in just the right spots to jump over without missing a beat. And if you looked closely, you'd see what Milo saw: initials. Not the kind kids carve with pocket knives during recess. These were etched with perfect spacing, neat loops, and a pattern so strange it made his peanut butter sandwiches taste like questions. One square read BJ equals L, while another simply had R6 carved neatly in the corner. A few bore compass directions, others just symbols like stars or keys. Milo once asked his teacher, Ms. Freeman, if she knew about the sidewalk engravings. She smiled in the way adults do when they don't want to admit they don't know something. Oh, that's just old stuff no one really remembers. That answer, of course, only made it worse, or better, depending on how curious you are. And Milo, well, his brain was like a drawer that always opened when something mysterious walked by. One chilly Tuesday in October, while he waited for his sandwich to unsquish itself in his backpack, Milo knelt beside the largest engraving 4 letters, arranged like compass points, SKLE. Underneath, faint but real, was a tiny arrow pointing toward the library's basement windows. Milo tilted his head. Then, because no one was watching, he whispered, "I bet you mean something." The wind picked up slightly, almost in response, and a single red leaf drifted down and landed on the K. Or maybe not. Stillwater wasn't used to puzzles, at least not the kind that didn't come with instruction manuals or crossword clues. The town's last great mystery had been whether Mrs. Kramer's cat was sneaking into the bakery at night. But Milo had a feeling this was something else, something older, and just never finished. His heart beat in a funny rhythm the rest of the way home, like it knew something his brain was still catching up to. That night, instead of watching cartoons or pretending to do spelling homework, Milo found himself tracing letters in the fog on his bedroom window. SKLE. He didn't know what it meant yet, but he would. He could feel it. Like how you can tell a puzzle piece is about to click into place. Outside, Stillwater glowed under sleepy street lamps. The town hummed the same tune it always had, gentle, slow, content. But inside one quiet house, on Birchwood Lane, a middle schooler had just found the beginning of something unexpected, something that had waited patiently beneath everyone's feet. The next afternoon, Milo skipped his usual detour past the bakery. His peanut butter sandwich was tucked carefully in his bag this time, with a note to himself that read, "Don't squish." He made a beeline to the library, weaving through shadows of elm trees and dodging a rake full of leaves like it was a booby trap. When he arrived, he dropped to one knee, the way a knight might before a royal puzzle. The engraving was still there, SKLE, and just beneath it, the faint arrow pointing toward the basement. This time, Milo brought tools: a spiral notebook, a stubby pencil he found in the school, lost and found, and a flashlight with batteries just strong enough to pretend they worked. As he sat on the cold sidewalk, he noticed the letters weren't carved like vandalism. They were even methodical, like someone had taken real care in making them. Milo carefully copied the letters and arrow into his notebook, labeling them Clue 1. Then he stood, brushed the grass from his jeans, and peered around the library's brick wall. Looked ordinary enough: dusty windows, a clump of ivy, and a faded poster for last year's book sale. But the arrow, it pointed down, and down was the window to the basement. Milo leaned over, pressing his nose to the glass. All he saw was a stack of broken chairs, a dusty piano, and a box labeled Winter Mittens. Still, his heart did a small leap. Someone had gone through the trouble of leaving a trail. That meant there had to be more. Milo circled the block 3 times that afternoon, checking every section of sidewalk like a squirrel guarding a secret stash of acorns. On his second loop, he found it, a small carving near the corner of Maple and 3rd, BJ = L. It looked older than the other one, like time had tried to erase it, but gave up halfway. He copied that one too. Then another, R6, carved right beside the crooked fire hydrant outside Stillwater Deli. Milo had passed it hundreds of times, never noticing anything except the smell of pickles. By the end of the week, his notebook was filling up. 14 engravings, some with letters, some with shapes. One was just a pair of tiny wings near the back entrance of the bowling alley. He circled that one twice, just to be sure it wasn't a squished moth. At home, he laid the clues out across his floor, replacing his toy train set with puzzle pieces and index cards. His parents thought he was studying geography. His sister assumed it was a very unfun version of charades. Neither paid much attention. Milo didn't mind. Secrets liked silence, but puzzles, they needed order. He tried everything: alphabetical, numerical, even astrological. He squinted at the letters sideways, held them up to the light, even sniffed one just in case. He began calling the sidewalk the board, and his notebook became the guide. He gave himself a code name, the Looker. One rainy Saturday, he stopped by the library and asked Ms. Ellen, the librarian, if she knew anything about sidewalk carvings. She paused, her fingers hovering over a stack of returned books. "Oh," she said, adjusting her glasses, "that old sidewalk. I remember kids used to mess around back there when I was in grade school. One summer, they called themselves the Sidewalk Society. thought they were detectives. Did they solve anything? Milo asked. Only their own boredom, I think, she said, smiling softly as Milo turned to leave. She added, funny, they remember someone once said those markings were part of a game. But if there were rules, they got lost a long time ago. Game. The word slid into Milo's mind like the missing piece of a jigsaw puzzle. A game had rules, goals, patterns. Milo didn't just have clues, he had moves. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every time he shut his eyes, he saw letters floating in the dark, dancing in unfamiliar combinations. His lamp clicked on 3 times between midnight and 2 a.m. at one point. He even tried meditating like his aunt from Colorado suggested. That mostly resulted in him thinking about lasagna. Still, something was happening. He could feel it in the way his feet automatically took him to new corners of the town, in the way his fingers traced invisible lines between hydrants, signs, and mailboxes. The puzzle wasn't random. It was scattered, maybe, and worn down by time, but it wasn't nonsense, even if no one else had seen it for 50 years. Milo had, and that made it real again. The next morning, as mist curled over the Stillwater rooftops and the bakery began its ritual of warming up cinnamon rolls at precisely 6:03 a.m., Milo stood on the corner of Elm and Pickett Street, staring down at a familiar pattern, D13, 3 bricks to the right, a shape that looked like a kite. The clues weren't just part of the sidewalk. They were the sidewalk. It rained for 3 days straight in Stillwater, not the dramatic lightning and flash flood kind of rain, but the slow, steady drizzle that seemed determined to turn sidewalks into soup and make hair frizz with purpose. Most kids spent the time indoors, lounging with cartoons or arguing with siblings over the last cherry fruit snack. But Milo spent the rainiest afternoon of the week crawling near the storm drain at the edge of Parker Avenue, knees soaked, hair plastered to his forehead, and a piece of chalk clenched in one muddy hand like it was a relic of ancient treasure-hunters. This particular storm drain had always bothered him, not because it was creepy though, it did make strange gurgling sounds at night, but because it had something carved into the lip of its frame, barely visible. Unless you were kneeling directly in the puddle like he was now, a triangle, not a very exciting shape. Unless you noticed what Milo did, the triangle had a second, smaller triangle nestled inside it, with a tiny dot in the center. It reminded him of the play button on a remote, or a compass that had forgotten which way was north. He jotted the symbol into his notebook, now proudly labeled Stillwater Enigma, Volume 1, and circled it 3 times. Then he leaned in and whispered, "Gotcha." The puddle responded with a plop, probably just a frog, or maybe the drain answering back. Back home, Milo spread his clues out again, tracing string between them like he'd seen in detective movies. D13, SKLE, the wings, the triangle. It was starting to feel like a map, only the destination hadn't declared itself yet. That night, after eating soup he didn't remember ordering and declining to explain the mud on his shoes, Milo sat by his window with a flashlight and a slice of cheese. It was thinking food, and while chewing slowly, he remembered something. Back in 1st grade, his teacher had given him a worksheet about patterns. He had stared at the problem. Red square, blue circle, red square. At the time he guessed randomly, but now it made sense. Repetition, outliers, the odd thing that didn't fit. Milo turned to his notebook. Most of the carvings were letters, some had numbers, but 5, exactly 5, were shapes: the triangle, the wings, the kite, the key, and one circle with a slash he had found near the train depot. 5 shapes, 5 letters in SKLE. That ... didn't match ... except ... It did, sort of. He flipped back a few pages, reread each note, then spread his arms wide like a conductor trying to coax a sleepy orchestra into harmony. If the letters were coordinates, like locations, and the shapes were actions like turning or stepping, then the sidewalk wasn't just marked randomly, it was telling a story. His heart thudded. The rain had paused. The clouds, perhaps sensing something afoot, began to part ever so slightly, and Milo, unable to wait a second longer, grabbed his coat and snuck out the side door. He raced toward the train depot. The station was barely used anymore, just a weekend stop for tourists headed to the country fairs. But the lot behind it was lined with stone path sand. One of those stones had the slashed circle etched into its corner. Milo knelt and ran his fingers over the symbol again. Then he looked up, slowly turning his head. The train sign, battered and faded, pointed toward the edge of Stillwater's nature trail, the one people only used in the spring, and below the sign, a small arrow carved into the wood. Another one, not paint, not stickers, carved, just like all the rest. He followed the arrow. The trail wound like a sleepy snake through the woods. The trees here stood like old librarians, tall, quiet, and vaguely irritated if you spoke too loudly. The path, usually overgrown, had been cleared recently. That was odd. Milo stepped lightly, watching for signs. A stick snapped underfoot, and he froze, heart thumping like a bass drum. But nothing happened. No squirrels scolded him. No owls blinked. The woods were as still as the stories his grandpa told before bed, slow, warm, and hiding just enough detail to keep your eyes wide. 10 minutes in, he spotted it. A small stone post half buried in moss, and on its surface, SKLE. It wasn't the sidewalk carving it, was cleaner, deeper, preserved. And this time the letters sat around a sun symbol, rays pointing outward like a compass. Milo crouched, breath fogging, his fingers trembled. As he touched the stone, he had found the source. It wasn't just a kid's game or sidewalk graffiti. Someone had built this, designed it for others to find. A trail of clues across the whole town, leading to this forgotten marker in the woods, and all of it had waited for years. For someone with time, with questions, with curiosity. Someone like him. He sat there for a moment longer, letting the silence wrap around him like a blanket. Then, softly, as if sharing a secret with the trees, he whispered, "I think I found your finish line." But the wind rustled, and a leaf tumbled by, brushing the stone. And that's when Milo realized this wasn't the finish, it was the beginning. The next morning, Milo woke up earlier than usual, before the sun had even decided whether it was going to show up properly. He tossed off his blanket, still in yesterday's jeans, and dashed for his notebook. Every corner of his brain felt like it had been gently wiggled awake overnight. That stone marker hadn't just been a stop along the way. It was ... central, a hub, a clue to the entire puzzle's shape. By 7:15 a.m., Milo had snuck 2 granola bars and a packet of cheddar crackers into his backpack. He left a note on the fridge that read, "Library, studying," which wasn't entirely false, just ... geographically misleading. Back at the nature trail, Deuce licked the grass and turned every spiderweb into a beaded necklace of morning light. Milo retraced his steps carefully, boots crunching softly on the gravel as the town behind him disappeared in mist and drowsy bird calls. When he reached the stone post again, he took out his flashlight and gently swept it over the ground around the marker. This time, something caught his eye. 2 sticks, laid side by side beneath a small pile of leaves. not a natural fall. Intentional. He brushed them away beneath the sticks. A patch of earth looked unusually loose, as though someone had disturbed it and then half-heartedly covered it back up. Milo knelt, scooped the dirt away with both hands, and uncovered the base of an old tree, one of those thick, gnarled trunks that looked like it had been around since dinosaurs debated tea versus coffee. There was a hollow, and inside the hollow, a leather-bound book, dusty, slightly damp on the bottom corner, and fastened with a brass clasp shaped like Milo squinted a sideways compass. His fingers shook as he opened it. Inside the front cover was a name, Sarah K. Lem.